101.3. Lance, you want to start?
Well, Rick has this fantasy that Trump is causing anti-Semitic attacks in America. But Trump has been nothing but good for Israel. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, something that no other president had the ability to do, had the courage to do.
All right, so we know he's pro-Israel.
Would you please not interrupt me?
But you already said this stuff, so get to the new stuff that you want to say. You already listed the shit that Trump has done for Israel.
Yeah, see, what the Democrats have done is the last thing that the Democrats did was under the Obama administration, they voted against Israel in the UN. They voted to condemn Israel for settlements building in the Palestinian claimed territories. Obama also made a deal that would allow the Iranians to develop a nuclear bomb that they could use to blow up Israel.
He made a better deal than Trump has managed to do with North Korea.
Rick, that deal actually promised that if a third party was to attack Iran to try to knock out
all right,
their
instead of talking about all this shit, talk about the impact on
stop
hate
interrupting
crimes.
me?
Yeah, but are we going to get to hate
Rick,
crimes?
You're not my manager.
But are we going to get to hate crimes? Because that's what we were talking
Rick.
about.
This is a two-man show.
Fine, but are we going to get to hate crimes?
You don't tell me what to speak on. I can speak on what I want to. I had to hear about you shitting in the bed. Now I'm going to make a point.
Okay.
All right. So Obama made a deal that made it so that if the Israelis were to attack, and I read this in the agreement, that if a third party was to attack the nuclear facilities that Iran was building, the U.S. would come to their aid with intelligence. So that's what the Obama administration did. They also used American tax dollars to fight against Netanyahu in his campaign for re-election, something that is unprincipled and unethical. Moreover, the Democrats under Representative Omar from Michigan, they refused to condemn her when she said, a Muslim named Omar actually said two things. She said, number one, Jews have dual loyalty to the U.S. and Israel, which is a vicious anti-Semitic attack. And she also said that Jews were paying off members of the American government, which is another vicious Jewish attack on Jews. And the Democrat Party refused to condemn her for that.
Well, they didn't condemn her specifically. They condemned a bunch of stuff.
No, Rick, you are obfuscating the truth. They condemned all... Rick.
Okay, so say what they did. Say what they did, and then we can move on.
You know what I was going to, but you
But
interrupted.
here you go. Do it.
Okay, I'm going to say it again now, camera. Representative Omar.
No, don't repeat yourself.
No.
Just say
It's none of your business what I say. Every time you interrupt me, I'm going to repeat myself. Okay. So Representative Omar said that Jews have dual loyalty in America to both Israel and to the U.S. They're actually more loyal to Israel. Then Omar said that Jews were paying off American politicians. And the Democratic Party was prodded into condemning her. They did not condemn her. They instead condemned all hate. Okay? They didn't even mention her. Now, Trump has been the most supportive of Israel of any American president, according to the Israelis. Okay, they love. They didn't rate the American presidents because it's not politically appropriate, but they love Trump. They love Pence. They are having. We have the best relations ever, and I submit. Oh, and by the way, another Democrat congressperson from Minnesota has a map in her office with no Israel on it, just Palestine. And the Democrats refuse to condemn that. So That's the difference between the Democrats and Trump. Now, Rick is trying to formulate a vague and strange theory that that Trump is actually is responsible for anti-Semitic attacks. And I submit that it's the Democrats under Omar and Tlaib and Obama that have turned the country, at least the Democrat Party, against Israel in physical actions and physical laws and treaties and statements. And we're going to have to depend on Rick coming up with this vague assertion that Trump has created a climate.
Okay, so, all right, now, all right, so being pro-Israel doesn't also mean you can't foster a climate of intolerance in the U.S. Lance, you gave me this article from a Jewish website called The Tower, and on hate crimes against Jews. And it says early on in the article, circumstantial evidence suggests the main perpetrators of anti-Semitic crimes come from two separate sources: right-wing groups such as white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and Muslims and or Arabs. Unfortunately, little information has been systematically collected on the subject. So I will make a demographic argument. 3.3 million Muslims in the United States, roughly 1.1% of the population. 200 million white people in the United States, half of whom, 100 million, are dumber than average. So 100 million dumb white people versus 3.3 million Muslims. Suggests to me that it's statistically likely that more hate crimes against Jews and hate crimes in general come from a much larger population, a 30 times larger population of dumb whiteys compared to Muslims.
Okay, one more reason that we don't use mathematicians to make policy. If there was any statistic that was important, I would say the fact that during the Obama administration, more Muslims were let into the country than at any previous time, and coincidentally, hate crimes against Jews have gone up dramatically. Coincidence? I don't think so.
Well,
also,
hate crimes went up. Hold on.
Also, genital mutilation has gone up for the first time in the United States.
Well,
before Obama.
No, all right. No, I'll give you genital mutilation, but hate crimes went up in 2017 when Trump was president. Rather, 37%. That's under Trump, not under Obama.
Okay, and I'm saying that
they just needed to get situated and comfortable.
Maybe they did. I'm just saying that if you bring Muslims into the United States, you're going to have hate crimes against Jews.
If you have dumb, racist white people in the United States, you're going to have hate crimes against Jews.
But we do not have more dumb, racist white people than we did.
We have
the only thing that's changed, Rick, is the number of Muslims that were brought in.
Look at the people who've been caught committing hate crimes. Some of the most recent hate crimes against Jews. You got a 19-year-old white guy shooting up the synagogue.
He had converted to Islam.
No, he fucking had.
Yeah.
No, not Mr.
Let's
Piano
look it
Player.
up.
All right.
All right.
Plus, he's a fucking white guy. He's a native-born white guy.
Rick, I know you're obsessed with white people, okay? Because like a good Democrat, you hate white people. I don't want to talk about.
Hate racist
I don't want to,
white guys.
Okay, I don't care. I don't want to hear your bigotry against white people. I am saying that Muslims in this country are committing attacks on Jews. All right? That's what I'm looking up right now. Okay?
Yeah, you couldn't find anything. You found that
there are
one
hundreds
article.
of them. There are hundreds of attacks by Muslims on Jews.
Find me an article that says.
Okay, I'll find it right now. Turn the camera on. There just happens to have been an attack on Israel. Hundreds of rockets are being shot into Israel. By who? White guys?
Yeah, this isn't Israel. This is
If
America.
they're being
This
shot
is
into Israel by Muslims.
Yeah,
right, Rick?
That's where Muslims live.
Well, that's kind of, it's amazing to me.
That's where fucking Muslims
I just
live.
can't believe it that you would even acknowledge that. So there are Muslims shooting rockets into Israel right now and killing Jews. Can you believe it, Rick?
Yeah, but this is fucking America.
And
This
they
is-
would never do that here,
This is
right?
9,500.
Right? So when they come here, they would never do such a thing, right?
Yeah, to some extent, but
The Muslims, when they come to the United States, are not anti-Semitic. They give that up, right, Rick?
a lot of them are anti-Semitic. Are they responsible for all the hate crimes against Jews?
I never said all.
No, but are they?
Do you
responsible for even 10%?
Do you think it's possible that the increase in Muslim immigration has anything to do with the increase of hate crimes against Jews? Be honest.
Less than 10%.
No, just
of
be
the
honest with
increase.
me. Do you think
I just
that
said
the increase has anything to do with the increase in Muslim immigration?
I'll be specific.
Yeah.
Out of the 37% increase
Yes.
in hate crimes,
Yes.
and there's a caveat that the statistics are hard to, because there's no central database that has access to all the various hate crimes. There's it's a wobbly number. But assuming that 37% is somewhat accurate.
You're making me sick right now.
Why? Because I'm being specific? I'm
No,
giving you
because you just can't answer a question
I'm
straightforwardly.
answering it as clearly as I fucking
Everybody
can.
that's listening knows that you're just
30.
You're just,
all right, here.
You're too much
fuck
of a
you,
coward
fuck
to
you,
admit the
fuck
truth.
off. I'm being perfectly specific. 37% increase in hate crimes in 2017 over the previous year.
Okay.
Of that 37%, I think that less than 10%, and probably well less than 10%, that is, of the 37% increase, less than 3%, 34% belongs to mostly whitey, and of the 37%, 34% whitey owns that, less than 3% belongs to Muslims.
Do you have any reason to believe that, or is it just a guess?
What I just said, like 5 minutes ago, that
You're just doing the math.
You're doing the math.
Wait. You're saying that the number of hate crimes that Muslims commit is identical to their statistical number in the population?
No.
So you think they commit more hate crimes against Jews than their statistical number in the population should suggest?
That's not unreasonable.
So,
But
if that is the case, then if Obama brought in a great increase in Muslims, then he would have increased the hate crimes against Muslims, against Jews.
marginally,
Right?
but
No.
No, but
You just admitted that Muslims were statistically more likely to commit anti-Semitic acts than regular Americans.
I don't know that.
You don't know that, but what do you think?
I think in the overall, I don't
You don't know. You don't know.
No, hold on.
You can't admit it. You cannot admit it. You're such a sniveling coward.
No, fuck off.
You can't admit it.
Fuck off and let me say what I think.
Yeah, what do you
Because
think?
you love to put thoughts
What do
in
you
my head.
think, you sniveling
All
coward?
right, so here's what I
You
think.
think Muslims do not commit statistically more crimes against Jews than regular Americans that are not Muslim, than Christians?
Here's the factor. Now, I'll admit
Yeah.
that Muslims on average
Yes.
are going to be more anti-Semitic than the average non-Muslim American.
Interesting. And does that mean that they would commit more anti-Semitic acts?
Maybe. Now, here's what...
No. I think we can pretty much figure that one out.
No, fuck off. Let me say what I want to say.
Okay.
Which is, when I see Mexicans driving in LA,
Oh, God.
they drive 10 miles per hour, a lot of them, under the speed limit. Because they don't want, they're new to the country. Or, white people, when they come to LA, this is off the subject, but white people who come to LA to be actors, they drive like assholes. They're on their phones. They've got Georgia license plates. They're just shit drivers. It takes them about 3 months to be beaten down to the point by LA life in LA. They think they feel entitled. So Whitey, when Whitey comes to LA, Whitey drives like shit. When Mexicans come to LA, they drive very carefully because they might be undocumented. They don't want to get in trouble. So the factor that weighs against Muslims who are new to the U.S. committing anti-Semitic hate crimes is that they're new to the fucking U.S. and they maybe don't want to get in trouble. Also, maybe they're extra motivated by American values. Because when Russians come to the U.S., based on the Russians I've met in bars, they got the hell out of Russia and made it to the U.S. because they love American values. So Muslims, I don't think most Muslims came to the U.S. to fuck with Jews. I think they came to the U.S. to enjoy the fruits of capitalism and democracy. And maybe some of them were already radicalized or become radicalized, and maybe they commit some hate crimes. But 100 million dumb white people versus 3.3 million Muslims, that's a 30-to-1 demographic advantage. So I think that most hate crimes...
Are those white people the deplorables that Hillary Clinton was referring to?
Trump has 40% approval, according to the average of all, or 41% approval, according to the average of all polls. And they're polling from a population of roughly 250 million Americans, adult Americans. 40% of 250 million is 100 million. Are all of them deplorables? No, but there are many tens of millions of hardcore Trump supporters.
More of the dumb people in the Trump camp or in the Democratic camp, the Biden camp, or the...
I don't know. You got dumb people on both sides because on the one hand, Trumpers. On the other hand, like anti-vaxxers, for instance. I would guess, but I don't know for sure, but one of the most reprehensible trends in America right now is people refusing to get their kids vaccinated for bullshit, pseudoscientific or non-scientific reasons. And fucking up everybody. We're in the middle of the biggest measles outbreak in, 30 years?
Is this a good science corner topic?
Well, just if you're a terrible person if you don't get your kids vaccinated, unless you have a legitimate medical reason not to do it. Like some kids can't get vaccinated because they've got a compromised immune system or something that doesn't let them get vaccinated. But if you're just not getting your kids vaccinated because you're afraid that that your kid might become autistic or some other bullshit you heard from Jenny McCarthy, you're a fucking asshole. And I would guess that statistically there are more anti-vaxxer assholes on the left than on the right. So there are dumb people on both sides.
Cinco de Mayo?
Okay. Yeah, today's Cinco de Mayo, and you and I, when we drove down here today, we saw a lot of assholes on the freeway. There was one guy zipping in and out of the carpool lane, which you're not supposed to do. There are places where you get in, you get out, but this guy zipped in and out 5 times in 2 miles. And he got pulled over by the cops, so we were very delighted. But I gotta say that the golden age of drinking and driving, I think, is over. There's still plenty of, way too many people drinking and driving, but the 70s were huge. The 60s were huge for I worked in a bar that had the world record for the most drinks served in a single day. 50,000 drinks served in one day. This place is huge. It was a 5-acre outdoor beer garden, and they had forfers. You pay for one drink, and not very much because this is 1981. So you pay for $2 for a sea breeze, cranberry juice and vodka. You get 4 cranberry juices and vodkas for $2. Beers were $1, except for forfers, you could maybe get, 4 beers for $1.50. There was a place in Texas. I don't know if it was Gillies or it was some other, huge, 1-acre country bar where you spun a roulette wheel to see how many drinks you got for the price of one, and you could win 12 drinks at one. So the 70s and 80s were just brutal slaughter by drunk people. And then Mothers Against Drunk Drivers came along and made things a little better. But in general, the bars are not what they used to be. Bars are now where fewer people go to bars to get laid. And in general, fewer people are trying to get laid. Sex is down by a fairly huge percentage among people in their 20s and teens. Because I've said this before, but in the 70s, everything sucked but getting laid if you could manage to get laid. But now there's a whole digital wonderland out there, as well as an endless cornucopia of internet porno, and people don't feel as compelled to get laid. It's less a measure of social worth than it was 40 years ago. Oh, by the way, I'm about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of my first orgasm. I just turned 59, and when I was 9 and a half, I had my first orgasm because I was a geek. Because if I was good at PE and sports, I would have been distracted by PE and sports. But no, I was an indoor kid, and I started reading adult novels, and somebody found a pack of Naked Lady playing cards and a book of Victorian pornography, and I read everything, and I started getting boners way too early because I was a geek. And so I started having orgasms way too early. So it's been 49 and a half years, which means my orgasm center is just burnt to a crisp. Last night I had to redo the movie Carrie in order to get a boner, where I said, I'll take Carrie and I'll make it dirty. So instead of her getting at prom, instead of getting hit in the head with a bucket of pig's blood, she gets hit in the head with a bucket of dildos. And in her fury, she uses telekinesis to make everybody in the entire auditorium all have sex with each other. This is what it takes after 49 and a half years. All right, what do you got, Lance?
All right. Okay, so I would like to refer anybody that's interested in this subject to a report by called Terrorist Incidents and Attacks Against Jews and Israelis in the United States, 1969 to 2016, written by Yehudit Barsky, Community Security Service. All right. Now, this lists hundreds of incidents of attacks on Jews. It breaks them down into explosions, shootings, and
all in America?
Other methods in the United States against Jews. It breaks it down to whether it's Jews or Israelis. It starts in 1969, and it goes all the way up to the end of 2016. So what you will find is that neo-Nazis do kill Jews, given the opportunity, but there is a list of incidents at the very end that would take me hours to read all of them.
But there's a pie graph earlier, right?
No, the pie graph is not, that doesn't deal with, that deals with whether it's Jews or Israelis, and another graph
It deals with victims, is
whether
that-
it's explosions or knifings or shootings or arson. And this list of all the attacks against Jews, if you spend the time to sit down and read it, we don't have time tonight, most of them are by Arabs, Muslims, okay? And people that sympathize with Muslims. There are some neo-Nazis involved, but so we're not to discount the importance of neo-Nazis, but go to the chronology of incidents, and you will find that that Muslims are murdering Jews.
Is there a summary paragraph that?
No, it just says that we got to keep aware of terrorism in the United States, mostly by Arabs, and that neo-Nazis will join in if they can. And it even says that sometimes they work together. Like they'll actually, Muslims will sometimes leave Nazi swastikas. So there you go, Rick. Here, I'll read it again, or I'll actually give the title. I'll give the title up here because Rick is convinced that Muslims commit exactly the same amount of crimes against Jews as your average Mormon or Presbyterian. And so I urge you all to read this thing because Rick is apparently very confused. And you can read it too, Rick.
Okay, all right.
Because Rick thinks that Lutherans and Presbyterians are just as likely to kill Jews as Muslims.
No,
right, Rick?
No, not I think it's...
Because they're on their best behavior when they get here, right, Rick? And those genital mutilations that they do?
All right.
Well, sometimes they bring some of the customs from the Muslim world over here.
All right.
But killing Jews would never be one of them, right, Rick?
They own the genital mutilation.
Oh, okay. But they would never kill Jews more than, say, your average Presbyterian would.
No, it's guys in dirty undershirts. I don't think that many...
I'm so disgusted that I just want to go on to another subject.
Yeah, what is...
Let's just pretend friendship.
Friendship. All right, so Lance, this is episode 101. You've seen us, if you're a regular
Can you
viewer.
get in the post, please?
Yeah, you've seen us spend hundreds of hours now yelling at each other. Yet, when the cameras stop, we're not playing. When I say, I've said fuck you to Lance more tonight than I think than ever before, and I'm not play acting. But when the cameras stop rolling, we calm down, and I don't have. I'm friends with the director. I'm friends with Lance, and I'm friends with a guy in Canada, but I don't really have that many friends that I have regular contact with. And I'm okay with saying that even though I find Lance's political views loathsome, I'm happy to count him as one of my best friends, which is weird. I don't know, maybe it's the way that evangelicals can excuse Trump for a bunch of non-Christian, a non-Christian history and a bunch of non-Christian behaviors. Because they see, I don't know, I mean, Lance is not just his political views. And I guess, when we're not forcing ourselves to only express political views, we can find plenty of ways of being around each other that don't lead to a lot of yelling. Lance?
Yeah, I think it's really childish to actually just recently, since Trump got elected, I've lost a lot of friends because I voted for Trump, and I really think that's sick. I think that obviously Rick gets different news sources than I do. And so I don't blame him for thinking the things he thinks. But I actually had a friend of 30 years. I've had 3 friends of 30 years that stopped speaking to me because I voted for Trump. And I also was not allowed in an important art show because the curator knew that I voted for Trump. So I really think it's, if anybody watching this is actually changing their friendships because people disagree with them, then that person is, then you're really nuts to do that. 'Cause if Rick and I can argue like this and still be friends, then people need to really grow up. And I think I'm doing this show to try to get Trump elected again. But I also think that this is healthy for people to see that you can disagree with one another and still be good friends. I mean, we might disagree this vehemently about a painting too. I mean, I don't blame a person because they come at an issue with a different source of information that's given them a different opinion. So anyway, that's all I have to say on the issue.
All right, so let's go. What's that?
I was just gonna say, the Mona Lisa was in the news. So
Yeah, you were talking. Okay, so
'cause you talked,
let's talk about the Mona Lisa, and then let's go to Nixon.
Yeah,
Um,
'cause you talked a lot earlier.
yeah. So speaking of opinions about art, our director tells us that the Mona Lisa's in the news because somebody came up with a theory that the Mona Lisa, which is said by some people to be incomplete, though it's a very complete painting. It's just that Da Vinci apparently kept noodling around with it year after year after year and was maybe never entirely satisfied with it. But it's not like there are big blank spaces or anything. It's just that he kept messing with it. But anyway, there's some new theory that Da Vinci never completed it because he fainted and broke his arm, and that screwed up his ability to paint, which I bet you have an opinion about that.
I haven't read the article, but I hate it when scientists try to come up with theories about art because they don't know a damn thing about it. The first thing is that the Mona Lisa is one of the most polished paintings in history. So if there was anything incomplete about it, that's a wild exaggeration. The second thing is that so I'm not saying that Da Vinci might not have wanted more time to noodle on it, but to call the Mona Lisa incomplete would be a wild misinterpretation. It's a very polished painting. But the other thing that the inventor of this brilliant theory doesn't know, and this is what's so funny, nobody ever asked me what my theory about Da Vinci is, but they asked this idiot that doesn't know anything about art his theory. I guess he never bothered to ask an artist, because if you asked a competent artist, he would tell you this. An artist doesn't paint with their hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, they're not baseball pitchers.
Yeah, you paint with your brain. So in other words, even if I could only hold the pencil like this, which I'd never done before, I would still be able to put the white in the place I want to put it, even if I had to hold my hand to do it. So the idea that Da Vinci would be really mortified because there's some very important spot. See, I'm doing it right now. There's some very important spot where he has to paint on the Mona Lisa, but he can't because his arm is broke. It just goes to show you that a dumb scientist will get worldwide attention and an artist that actually knows how it would be done could have explained it to this scientist, but nobody's ever going to ask an artist because we have such bad reputations. But you see, I'm not painting with my hand-eye coordination. I'm painting with my mind. My mind is telling me to put a highlight right here. So I'm getting it on there. So normally I like to hold it like this, but I'm holding it like this, and I can still get the white where I want to. See? That's how dumb the people are when it comes to understanding how art is done. All right, so no, scientists, that's not what stopped Da Vinci. Moreover, we don't even know if the Mona Lisa was the last piece that Da Vinci did. As far as I know, he may have done others. So I'm not even sure about that part. Does the article take into account such basics as was the Mona Lisa the last piece by Da Vinci? I don't think it was. So, all right, so that's all I have to say about that.
All right.
What do you have to say in terms of just the Mona Lisa from your professional perspective?
The Mona Lisa is not underrated. What is, a lot of people ask, well, what's so great, to turn twist your body, well, no, you're fine. What's so great about the Mona Lisa? And in order to really understand it, you have to take into account two things. The first is that in the days of the Mona Lisa, there was nothing as realistic. The Mona Lisa was the most realistic painting of its day. It was the most convincing illusion of its time. And contrary to what these geniuses will tell you, the march of art up until the 19th century was towards greater and greater realism. So in other words, up until the early 20th century, artists were constantly trying to make things look more real. And so in the Renaissance, the Mona Lisa was a big breakthrough towards greater realism. And today, the Mona Lisa still is one of the most realistic paintings you'll ever see. So even with centuries of improvements and knowledge, improvements in technique, in training, nobody has painted a portrait more realistic than the Mona Lisa. When I say realistic, I mean more three-dimensional. It really appears to be three-dimensional, and that was Da Vinci's goal. So you can't count out the Mona Lisa, even though there have been other things since then that were also extremely realistic. Nothing more three-dimensional. And that's important. That's all I have to say.
All right. So I read an article or saw some statistics that say that roughly.
Twist your body more away from me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
But double the percentage of people who wanted Nixon impeached right before he resigned want Trump impeached right now. And I thought, well, I wonder if Lance thinks Nixon got a raw deal. So I called him up and said, can you defend Nixon? Do you think he got screwed over? Do you think he shouldn't have quit? And you said, you thought about it for a second and you said, yeah.
Well, here's the way I look at it. Nixon did the wrong thing. He was going to use the IRS. One of the reasons that he was impeached was for using the IRS he was planning on using the IRS to harass his political opponents. And he was using espionage against his opponents. The Johnson and Kennedy administration were as bad or worse. So if you're going to get rid of Nixon, you should have gotten rid of Johnson and Kennedy. And I mean, as soon as that option became available, Johnson and Kennedy took advantage of it for their own nefarious purposes. Now, you may say, well, was it right to nip it in the bud when Nixon did it, though? Did that send a message? Well, it had good and bad consequences. The good news was that presidents had to be a lot more careful and they were put on notice not to do those things, even though Obama did them when he got the chance. We're just looking into it right now. Obama used the IRS to harass the Tea Parties, which was proven in court. And Obama, it looks like, used the FBI to surveil Trump.
We've been arguing about that for 2 years.
Okay, so it didn't stop Obama. But the bad news is that when Nixon was driven from office, the effect was that we lost the Vietnam War. Because the only thing that was left to protect Vietnam was Nixon. And we were so caught up in Watergate that the Paris Peace Accords, when they were violated by the communists, and the communists invaded South Vietnam, Nixon was not there to save them. So the consequence of losing Nixon was that 15 million South Vietnamese had to live under communist rule, and quite a few, I believe, as many as 2 million Cambodians and hundreds of thousands of South Vietnamese died. So what started out as a way of cleaning house in the United States led to millions of deaths in Southeast Asia.
I gotta say that very few people think you're by far in the minority in thinking the Vietnam War could have been won.
Well,
it doesn't mean you're wrong. I don't want to get into an argument about that, but most people don't think it was a winnable war.
Right, but you see, most people aren't smart enough to make the connection that Nixon was enforced with keeping the Paris Peace Accords. And that meant it turned out after the war was over, General Giap, who was the head of North Vietnamese forces, I believe it was General Giap, GIAP, admitted that the American Air Force was weeks away from defeating the North. And all Nixon had to do was go back to bombing the North Vietnamese army when they invaded. And they would have turned around and said, okay, we can't do it. And so South Vietnam would be free today, and millions of people would probably still be alive in Cambodia. So the Watergate, you could say it was better for America to get rid of a corrupt president, which Nixon was, but when you do things like that, there are consequences.
Let's talk some positive consequences. People were so sick of politics after Watergate and of war after Vietnam that the rest of the 70s were just a fuckfest. People went crazy. It was the beginning of the disco era, and people were wearing, their tight polyester pants, their platform shoes, their harem pants, their danskin leotards, and doing the hustle and just having sex willy-nilly with each other until herpes and AIDS came along.
Would you say that the forced resignation of Nixon led to you masturbating less?
No, because I was nerdy and I couldn't get laid, even in the 70s.
All right. Is there another topic?
Just real quick, do you think if Trump would have been president, he would have won the Vietnam War?
Our director asked if Trump had been president, would he have won the Vietnam War?
Well, we had a very strange policy in the Vietnam War, and that was we were willing to fight hard in some ways and not hard in other ways. Some people say that the best way to have won that war would have been to just go all out and fight as viciously and carelessly as possible of civilian deaths in order to get it over with quickly.
Some people were arguing to use nuclear weapons.
Yeah, you didn't even have to use nuclear weapons. I'll give you an example. When we attacked a Vietnamese village, we used to actually inform them that we were coming. We would actually notify the enemy so that they could save the civilians. And when we did that, the North Vietnamese army would just hide in their underground areas. So we fought the war in a very strange way. And I think that Trump won the war against ISIS by changing the rules of engagement. And I think he would have done the same thing against Vietnam.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Vietnam War, I mean, it wasn't like...
Can you lean more towards, can you pull your hand, your far hand, can you pull it closer to your head and put the other hand down?
All right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, but the Vietnam War was kind of a whole series of wars in that it went on for nearly 30 years. It began in the late 40s under the French in Vietnam, right?
Yeah, I mean, it actually started with the Japanese taking over Vietnam, which was a French colony. They defeated the Japanese, then the French were defeated by the North Vietnamese.
So
it
was kind of across 30 years. The character of the war must have changed a bunch of times. So you can't really say if Trump would have won or not. In that there were a bunch of different. It's really
we could have won. I mean, all we had to do was use the Air Force. We could have used conventional bombs. We actually. A thing that people don't understand, Democrats have created a myth that we lost the Vietnam War. The Paris Peace Accords, which were negotiated by Kissinger in 1972, actually allowed for South Vietnam to remain free, which was the goal of the war. We'd actually won that war. But the Democrats, under the leadership of Ted Kennedy, refused to enforce the accords when the North invaded. The North invaded when Nixon was under pressure and resigned. So the North just figured, well, Nixon's not around, let's just invade.
All right, let's wrap it up. Send us money at Lance versus Rick at PayPal or at gmail.com. Though something's wrong with it right now, I got to fix it, but wait till it's fixed, then send us money for more of this stuff. And then, Lance, you do your disclaimer.
Yeah, all the paintings that you see in this room are not photographs. They're oil paintings. They're art.
They're educational.
They're educational in that they're meant not to titillate in any way, but to be of aesthetic value. They're painted from live models. The models are anonymous. And no photography is involved. They're done just the way I do Rick right now. So they're just paintings, nothing to be worried about.
They for sale.
And they're not pornographic. I don't want them to be pornographic. And they're for sale. All right.
All right, that's it. Thank you.